Great to see so many friends and friendly faces. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and all of us here are just very thankful and want to thank UCLA and UCLA CRESST for putting together this amazing conference. In particular, I just want to thank Lee Tsai and Dr. Eva Baker and Greg Chung and Liz Redmond for bringing us all together. Yeah, give them a hand. Because it's not easy to put on a conference and to be so thoughtful about, who to bring together and what topics to discuss with such an amazing group of people that have assembled today. So thanks again to the team at UCLA. My name is David Lowenstein. I work at PBS Kids Digital, and I help manage the Ready to Learn grant with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And we actually have a partnership with UCLA CRESST. So it's really my pleasure to be here and to be moderating this panel with a very esteemed group of panelists that I will introduce now. Dr. Kimberly Gomez, to my far left, is Professor of Education and Information Studies. Her work centers on examining teachers' and students' development and use of literate practices in formal and informal contexts. Kim views the investigation and support of literate practices as a foundational area of inquiry because of its singularly important role in providing access to educational opportunity and supporting equitable achievement and attainment outcomes. Kim employs the design and study of literate practices to enhance learning in math, science, and technology use with an aim of informing theoretical and practical understandings. Dr. Gomez received her PhD from the University of Chicago and has served as a postdoctoral fellow and a research associate in the Center for Learning Technologies in Urban Schools at Northwestern in Northwestern University's Learning Sciences program. Gomez has been a tenured faculty member at University of Illinois at Chicago, University of Pittsburgh, and is currently a tenured professor of education at UCLA and is jointly appointed in the Information Studies Department here. Since 2011, Kim Gomez has been the lead language and literacy fellow at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. She's the recipient of numerous distinguished awards and fellowships and the author of over 50 referred journal articles, book chapters, and conference proceeding articles. Kimberly is married to Louis M. Gomez, and together they are the parents of 5 children. And Kimberly enjoys travel, reading, writing, genealogical research, and playing with the family dogs Milo and Yubi. Very cool. So welcome, Dr. Gomez. To Dr. Gomez's right is Mary E. Hewitt. Mary is the executive director for the Los Angeles County Alliance for Boys and Girls Clubs. It's an umbrella organization that brings resources, marketing, and fundraising to all Boys and Girls Clubs in Los Angeles County. Mary spearheads innovative programs, special events, and service to under-resourced communities in Los Angeles, including innovative college and career programs that help club youth get meaningful employment. She has a distinguished background in the government, business, and nonprofit sectors. Mary serves as a board member for the South Bay Business Environmental Coalition, as well as being a member of the National Diversity Coalition. She graduated from Central Washington University in Mass Communications and Broadcast Journalism and obtained a master's degree from Georgetown University in International Affairs. Welcome, Mary. And last but certainly not least, I want to introduce Dr. Eva Baker, Distinguished Research Professor in the Divisions of Psychological Studies in Education and Social Research Methodology at the UCLA Grad School of Education and Information Studies, and has directed the UCLA Center for Evaluation since 1975. I know she's telling me, don't read this, don't read all this, but it's important that we know and recognize all that she's done. She's the founding director of, I think my slides went ahead, there we go. She is the founding director of CRESST, a competitively awarded national institution funded by the Department of Ed. Dr. Baker is a recipient of numerous distinguished awards and appointments and has an extensive bibliography. She's former president of AERA, former president of Educational Psychology Division of the American Psychological Association, and a former editor of Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis. She was co-chair of the Committee to Revise the Standards for Educational and Psychological Testing, and her research is focused on the integration of instruction and measurement, including design and empirical validation of principles for developing instructional systems and new measures of complex human performance. Eva is presently involved in the design of technologically sophisticated testing and evaluation systems of assessment in large-scale environments for both military and civilian education. Wow. So we have an amazing panel, and it would be overwhelming for the average moderator, but because I get to work with brilliant people like this every day, many of whom are here in the audience. I work with the executive director at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Dr. Pamela Johnson. She's the executive director of Ready to Learn, and she's here. And Jeremy Roberts, the senior director of learning technologies at PBS Kids, Cosimo Feline, Scott Cummings. We just have, so I get to work with brilliant people all the time. So I'm not as overwhelmed as I probably would be with this panel, but nonetheless, very honored to be a part of this. And, our panel is going to pick up on many of the themes from Marcelo Suarez Orozco's keynote this morning. We're going to have a discussion regarding how to prepare kids for success in school and in life by fostering and accelerating educational excellence and ensuring equal access to quality educational opportunities. So we're going to engage in a conversation with this panel and with all of you for a little bit of the time to grapple with three questions. What are the skills, practices, and habits of mind that all kids need to develop in order to reach their potential in today's world? Where are we having the most success in helping students develop those skills that they need to achieve, and where are we struggling? And finally, what role can technology and media play in assessing, supporting, and scaling of these skills, and especially in underserved communities? So, this quote I'm going to pull up from Dr. Martin Luther King ties to some ideas that Marcelo spoke about in his keynote earlier and reminds us of the challenges and opportunities when it comes to equity. And as you can see, it says, Dr. King said, through our scientific and technological genius, we have made of this world a neighborhood, but we have yet to have the ethical commitment to make of it a brotherhood. And so I think that's a really powerful quote that can help guide our conversation and remind us of the opportunity, but also the challenges that we face. So before we get into the panel Q&A, I thought it would be great to, if you all could talk a little bit amongst yourselves, so we can have a little bit of a turn and talk here, where if you could just turn to your neighbor and talk for a minute or two and answer one or both of these questions. What are the most important skills that you learned as a child, and who or what helped you develop those skills? So if you could talk to your neighbor for a minute or two, and then maybe we'll call on a few people to share.
Small question.
Okay.
Oh, well.
So we're gonna reconvene here, but I would love to hear what some of you have talked about.
No sweat.
I see a smile. I see a face that's familiar.
We're
Roar.
organized.
Maybe I can get you to talk about what you and your neighbor spoke about.
We spoke about curiosity and how, on the one hand, a child's innate interest in the world, which might be, in some cases, unusual, was deeply supported by the family. Lots of museum runs and so forth. Mm-hmm. On my side, maybe a couple of things, but the ability to speak or to talk was a thing that replaced my handwriting, which is 6 standard deviations below everybody else's. And again, the teachers I had, instead of bludgeoning me over handwriting, actually encouraged me to talk what I meant instead of having to figure out how to read what I wrote. Mm. And again, it was the teachers in that case for me who were supportive.
Very cool. Thank you. Who else would like to share? Anyone? No? Yes? Yeah?
I mean, I really struggled with this, but as I look back, I lost my father when I was very young, when I was 7, and my mother had several other responsibilities. So self-regulation, actually, learning to not rely on outside regulation for studying, doing homework, just getting it done, and regulating my own behavior. Wow.
And where did you get some of that self-regulation support?
I don't know that anybody ever taught me that, but I mean, it really was, I just had to do it. Mm-hmm. Seeing my mother struggle with, I was born and raised in the Soviet Union, so my mother struggled with the reality of life, which wasn't very convenient and very comfortable, and my siblings, so I just sort of made an assessment that if I wanted to get anywhere, I needed to sort of regulate my own behavior.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, it's interesting to think about like what was nature versus what was nurture, and Because, there's definitely skills that can be nurtured, but that maybe you had a proclivity for, and it's interesting.
Yeah.
Anyone else before we move to the panel? Yeah? In the back?
Thank you. When I would come home from school each day, I wasn't asked, what did I learn? I was asked, what good question did I ask?
That's great. Who asked you that question?
My mother.
Wonderful. Great. That was really, I'll have to remember that. That's a good one. One more? Sure.
Well, the three of us back here spoke of the value of unstructured play for us, fostered our curiosity, and then I was saying, I don't remember using the term I'm bored as readily as I hear some of my little younger friends.
That's great. Thank you all for giving thought to these really important questions and sharing some of that. So we're gonna really be discussing these important skills on this panel conversation today, and how people develop those skills. Where is it working? How can we use technology to scale it? All of the questions that I mentioned before. So I'll start. As I mentioned, PBS Kids and UCLA CRESST, along with Corporation for Public Broadcasting, have been in partnership through the CPB-PBS Ready to Learn initiative, which is funded through Congress, administered by the U.S. Department of Education, and allows us to make educational media that improves children's readiness for success in school and in life. And with UCLA CRESST, we've been working together adding learning analytics to PBS Kids games that build social and emotional learning, as well as math, science, and literacy skills. So millions of kids throughout the country are engaging with free PBS Kids digital content, and we're learning a lot about how to utilize back-end data to improve game design and help caregivers assess and support their children's learning needs. So I want to start by passing it over to Eva and asking her to talk a little bit about her experience with assessments and how they can promote equity.
Well, am I live now? Right. Thank you, David. I don't know how they can affect equity. I think the bigger question is, can they impact equity at all? There's nuance in language that I'm not very sophisticated about, but we talk about fairness in testing. We talk about equity, typically about opportunity, and we talk about justice. And testing probably doesn't work along that continuum very well. The only things that I can say about testing in support of equity is something I really didn't like, No Child Left Behind, but it did support transparency. And it did, in its policy requirements, expose disparities of different groups in performance. Granted on very inadequate measures, but it did let people know that there were these differences. And secondly, required lots of participation. The new law still requires participation, so that what schools used to do would be have people stay home on the testing day so that they could jack up their performance levels and so on. I'm sure you're all aware. I guess it connects up to what your goals are for assessment. And I think that right now the way assessment's working or not working in the schools is more dysfunctional than functional, because it focuses on accountability, at a big policy level, and while there's rhetoric about and isolated incidents, I'd say, of formative assessment, teacher engagement, all the things that we think about, I don't think it's anything close to widespread or effective. And that may be very well. I was writing last night something else, and I was thinking, why has the arguments about assessment kind of dropped from view compared to 5 or even 10 years ago. And I thought, oh, it's because we have worse things to worry about. You know, so maybe testing isn't quite up there as a focus when when the house is burning.
And Kim, we've talked a little bit about, and when we were preparing for this session, about the importance of helping educators, teachers be more mindful of what they're trying to assess. Can you talk a little bit about that and how questions have consequences?
Well, I shared in a conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago that much of what I think is worrisome in schools today is that teachers are not being taught in, at least as far as I can tell, in training programs, whether alternative certification or traditional, to think about what it is they're trying to assess and how to leverage the various sorts of assessments that are available to them, and finally, how to think about those pesky little questions that are at the end of units and chapters and so forth that are there in the textbooks. They can be avoided, but avoiding them is probably not the right solution, at least in the eyes of the Board of Education. And so instead you ask yourself as a teacher, or you could ask yourself, what is it that I want to know? What is my big goal for learning? If I want students to be able to make predictions based on the content that they've just completed, that they've read, that the activities they've engaged in, how do I ask or how do I use the predictive question that's here? How do I think about a synthetic question? And many of the questions that are at the end of these chapters are some combination of fact-based, a question that asks for synthesis, for inference, a question that asks for prediction, any number of things like that. And to actually step out on the balcony, if you will, and say, what is it I most want students to be able to do? What do I want them to be able to show me they know? And to then offer them that opportunity. The other thing that there are sometimes exit slips and other sorts of things that could be formative assessments that are used at the end of a class period, but then nothing seems to come of them. Whereas an exit slip could be a tool for a formative assessment, a tool for reteaching, a way to group students so that students who have expressed I'm not quite sure I get this yet, and students who have moved on can be perhaps separated temporarily into workshopping within a classroom, or could teach each other in a mentorship sort of way. I think what we're missing in assessment, and I think Eva's right, there's so much else happening that conversation is not as abundant as it should be, but what we're missing is the thought about assessment as a tool for equity, in that it can really be a way to reveal how to build on what kids know and how to listen when they're telling you, I don't know it, but with a little help I can know. To think much more, to use a not popular phrase, but I think an important one, diagnostically and clinically within the classroom context.
Really important. So you spend a lot of time in your work helping educators figure out these important things about figuring out what they want to assess and how to go about doing that. You also do a lot of work thinking about what students need, particularly underserved students. And you mentioned to me that underserved students need to be taught the rules of the game, and that certain strategies that they can learn can allow them to be more successful in schooling. Can you talk a little bit about the rules of the game and what you meant by that?
So many of you may know Lisa Delpit's work on Other People's Children, her most famous piece, or one of the most famous pieces. And in it, this is a paraphrase, but she talks about that kids need to be taught, particularly underserved kids, need to be taught what the explicit expectations are in learning in the classroom. She makes a claim that often the rules are not explicit, and the rules are known by middle class, particularly white middle class and upper middle class kids. They're taught in their homes. They're taught about the ways, the kinds of things that you engage in dialogue. The gentleman back there who said his mother asked him every day, "Did you ask a good question?" If you're an underserved child, the likelihood is that nobody's asking you if you asked a good question that day. And so somewhere in a child's educational experience, those rules, those kinds of things about, are you asking good questions? Are you making claims and offering support from the claims, particularly from the materials that you're reading? Are you doing the kinds of things that are expected of someone who is educated in society today? Are you able to demonstrate those? It's sort of, we want kids to be able to be successful. We want underserved kids to be successful, but we often worry about putting too much pressure on them or having them be subsumed into and incorporated into a white middle class way of doing things. And my argument is, while we're trying to change the world, while we're trying to create equity, there are children in classrooms today, every single day, who need to learn these rules of the game so that they can be successful in the world that exists right now, while we're trying to make the world a better place for them in the future.
It's great. It's great. I had not heard that book, but after talking to you, I've already ordered it on Amazon. So, a shameless plug for an author I don't even know, but is clearly onto something there. So, you're doing tremendous work within these institutions that are, quite frankly, as Eva mentioned, very resistant to change. It's hard to create institutional change at scale. And so, what you said at the end about changing the systemic issues, but still giving the kids who are in this not so perfect system the skills and the rules of the game is powerful. Mary, you work outside of traditional schools, although Boys and Girls Clubs are now getting into charter schools and having a lot of success. But can you talk about what you do to help underserved kids have the opportunity to develop those skills that they might not necessarily be getting in pre-K to 12th grade in classroom instruction?
The Boys and Girls Clubs really focus and hone in on STEM education, and that's been an initiative of ours for 4 years, coming from Boys and Girls Clubs of America. But we also have college and career readiness programs that we really get the kids focused very young, much younger than we used to, middle school. And we want to make sure that they have every opportunity they can and develop the skills that they need, not to kind of say that they would pick up where we pick up where the public schools maybe leave off. And so we do offer sports and challenging sports programs, health and wellness. When you think about the fact that we're offering cooking and nutrition and arts, and so kids get more of a robust education, and we want them to have those soft skills so that they can excel. And a lot of those soft skills also entail things like communication, team building, problem solving, critical analysis, things that are really important. We even have a junior CEO program that's phenomenal, and it gets the kids in the mindset in middle school of being their own CEO, coming up with a product or a service, and studying their competition, and then putting together a business plan. And so we want to encourage those kinds of things so they're ready for the jobs of the future.
And Boys and Girls Clubs focuses primarily on kids between the ages of 6 and 18?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
And really impressive to learn about all of the work you're doing, particularly for the workforce and the college and career programs are just outstanding.
Thank
and
you.
Eva, you also, in addition to the work that you do to try to change the world in these institutions of learning, you also work outside, in the informal context and in the workforce context. Could you give us some examples of the positive use of assessments outside of the formal classroom that you've been involved in?
Well, yeah, I guess. Today I'm in my Cassandra mode, everything is sort of half empty. There you go. I was a participant in the Girls Club of Hollywood from age 6 to probably 12, 3 times a week, because I had a working mother. and it was a safe place, and I learned a lot, and I commend their activities to you. I know we've been working with you in a research environment, but I think my sense is that there's much more interesting things going on around schools as much as in schools. And I think we need to sort of make sure that people take advantage of these opportunities, particularly if equity is a high priority issue for us. I don't know, is this the question that I'm supposed to answer, the U.S. Navy? Okay. Hi, Ray. Ray Perez is program officer for us on lots of U.S. Navy activity, and we're in an environment now that is kind of R&D gift, if you could think of it, in that through Ray and Steve and other colleagues' efforts, we're working in the parts of the Navy that start with recruitment, sort of like selection or getting people, choosing people, into the issues of classification, which means what kind of jobs will these kids have? And remember, they're mostly 18-year-old, just out of high school. So their first level schools have, I think now, are working on 67 different jobs. It used to be more. They may be consolidating. So we're developing an assessment system for 67 different jobs that will ultimately encompass within course measures and end of course measures. The next part of our work, most recently determined, is following up people to see how they perform their jobs when they're on ship or wherever they're going. And then last of all, developing a system that will allow us to help them use evidence to promote people. So if you think of end-to-end, that is from the entry points to potentially advancement points, and the opportunity to think about it coherently rather than a different performer at every, or contractor at different spaces. It's really very exciting, and the Navy's been extremely supportive in our conducting research as we do this. So it isn't simply cranking out widgets, although there's some of that deadlines have to be met and so on. But our general goal is to see if we can come up with a coherent, cognitively anchored plan that uses advanced technologies like, let's say, the development of ontologies or content mapping, map to the kinds of requirements, stimulus and response requirements of people in the context of cognition and learning, and see if we can create a model that can be applied within each of those 67 areas, rather than have them develop as they have in the past, more or less one at a time, with the only coherence, I think, this is an overstatement, but say the noticeable coherence is everybody uses multiple choice. So we're trying to expand some of the work into simulation and mapping, and my colleagues sitting around here, John Lee, Liz, Alan Koenig, Greg Chung, and the project director, Kil-Chan Choi, in addition to our CRESST director, are all involved. And so it's quite an exciting opportunity for us. Marcus Isole is also working on, AI-ish components to this work. So this is a big opportunity for us. And I guess the only other thing I'd say is that over the years, we work for the Department of Defense with DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and the Navy over many, many years, pretty much since I've been here. And what we've been able to do, which, you know, I had to step out of my biases, actually, to do some of this work, but we've been able to cross-leverage things. We can actually show how education precepts affected the DoD, which is sort of a big shock. The other way, show learning from what advanced technology and advanced planning can do. We've figured out how to apply that into civilian education for little kids, even PBS little kids. And so it's been, it's outside. It has the attribute of being very real, whereas school is often artificial. And the requirements, just like in life, change. So everybody has to be adaptable.
Yeah, I mean, what we are learning about learning is mind-blowing. And I think we all recognize that we're lifelong learners. And so it's great to hear, you know, Mary, what you're doing through the Boys and Girls Clubs to help these lifelong learners in this new thing where, I mean, you said to me, like, technology has changed everything. And, you know, Kim with helping teachers learn how to teach in this new age that we're in, and Eva, you know, helping people in the workforce, in the civilian and, like you said, the military sector, develop those competencies to navigate. And you know, we've cited a few examples, but I'd love to talk a little bit more with you all about where you're seeing success in helping kids develop these skills. You know, Mary, you've been a big proponent of public-private partnerships that are focused on outcomes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the Boys and Girls Clubs, just to give you some context, so the LA County Alliance for Boys and Girls Clubs were kind of an umbrella organization for the club. So each club is their own 501c3, and they have their own board. But all of the clubs have been very focused on trying to figure out ways to really bring our kids into the 21st century in terms of access to technology and what have you. And my focus for the past 6 years has been access and opportunity. And so giving them the skills they need, technology has changed everything in terms of the kids are doing their reports on their phones because they don't have a laptop. And to me, it's, again, access and opportunity. And the majority of our kids are underserved and minority. And so we have STEM labs in all of the clubs, some better equipped than others. But we have partnered with a lot of the tech companies, and right now we're in the process of something that's very new, where we would partner with different companies. There are tech companies like Silicon Beach, and we would open these open source labs. They wouldn't be a Boys and Girls Club per se, but they would offer the kids access to what they can't get in the clubs or at school, which would be artificial intelligence, virtual reality, all of these different state-of-the-art innovations that the kids would have access to hopefully ignite that engineer in them or that technician. So that's what's exciting and really getting our kids into being ready for future jobs. And we call it future ready. So it's very important for us to be able to partner and leverage and optimize all of these relationships that we have. And we also partner with other nonprofits like Junior Achievement and things like that to bring our kids financial literacy. That we want to make sure they have all of the tools and skills that they need so that they have a successful future. But it is important with public and private. We couldn't do it without it. And technology is, I say every company is a technology company today. And our kids need to be ready for that. And I think it's 80% of the jobs of the future are going to be STEM related. And so, of course, this has to be a big focus of ours.
And, you know, you've also mentioned a couple of other examples that I thought would be great if you could talk about the 60-minute story on MIT's Future Factory and some of the campuses that Google and Microsoft have opened, opening their own schools to create access.
Yes, it's astounding. The educational system is changing, and our kids that go into college, just heard Austin Butner, the superintendent of LAUSD schools, speak last week, and he was saying that 12 out of every 100 kids that are in college, only 12 will graduate. To me, that was astounding. So to know that like Google, Microsoft, Apple don't require degrees anymore, there's a paradigm shift that has to occur. So if it means having our kids go to a campus, go to Facebook for the day or for a week, or even 3 days a week would help them during the summer where we have that summer brain drain. Now it becomes summer brain gain. And so we are partnering with them to give them access to experts and mentoring and people that want to take the time to teach them and show them so that they can excel in whatever they want to do. But yes, that's, I think it's fascinating. We are looking at partnering with Google and Microsoft and Apple in these open source labs that would be resourced and funded by them so that the kids could go after school. And the other thing that I think is really important that was said earlier by the dean so eloquently, it's diversion. We have to keep our kids off the street. And the way we do that is you offer them opportunities and access to experts, but it has to be fun. If it's not fun, our kids won't come. So it's really important for us to make sure that we have these fantastic opportunities, and sadly, you can't just get that at the schools anymore. Things are moving so quickly, and the companies are rapidly changing, as we all know, due to technology. So focus and paradigm shifts are causing us to help our children learn differently, and we want to be able to meet those needs.
Kim, you had mentioned an organization that I wasn't familiar with, but it's doing amazing work throughout California called 9 Dots. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
So 9 Dots is a small but growing organization based in Hollywood, right off of Highland, and they started as a STEM-focused group in after-school work, but quickly began to realize that their expertise was in teaching kids coding. So they partnered with an organization called Get Coding, which is a national group. What 9 Dots does, at least is better than anyone I've seen recently, is that they face the challenges of having kids really understand how to deal with failure, deal with problem solving, and deal with the reporting about their failures, problem solving, and success. They do that better than anyone I've seen recently in the LA area. And what do I mean by facing failure? So the kids, and these are kids who are anywhere from 6 years old up to maybe 12 years old, the kids are engaging with learning how to code. But rather than just simply engage in what I think of as kind of playing coding, which is perfectly fine, they are asked to think about when they didn't code through, when it wasn't successful, and they had to go back and fix it. What was that like? How did you manage it? What did you do to make the change necessary to be successful? How did you feel when that happened? Did you call on someone else for help? Those kinds of help-seeking and self-regulation and metacognitive awareness of what one is capable of, and to really think about how I solved a problem, and they even have them journal, like making notes about what they did to solve the problem, so next time maybe that might be a useful approach for them. Those are the kinds of things that I think the kids of today need to be doing, because they are exposed to a lot of technology, but far too often in the classrooms, the technology is just kind of used as a substitute for the book, as opposed to being used as an innovative tool to get kids really engaged in the metacognitive skills at various levels that are necessary to be competitive and to be to feel efficacious in the world today.
Yeah, how many of you were familiar with 9 Dots? Show of hands. Yeah, I was not. It's outstanding, and it really, I think, aligns with so much of what this panel and the work of each of these great panelists are doing. This idea that, yes, technology is important. These subject matter areas of science and technology and the various literacies are critical, but there's the social emotional piece, there's the 21st century skills, whatever you want to call those. There's buzzwords, but it's this idea that it's the blending of these things that are so very needed. And Eva, you and I spoke about a really interesting initiative that Snapchat is supporting with a modest investment. You want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. So my friend Joan Herman and I were figuring out how to spend our leisure time, and connected up to a group called LA Giving Circle, which supports women and activities for women and girls. And so we, in the course of our work, found a place called Code Talk, and it is part of St. Joseph's Service Center, which is in Ocean Park. Those of you who are local will know it sort of serves a very large homeless population in Santa Monica and Venice. So the focus of this activity is to teach women and girls to be web developers. They work 15 weeks. They work as a project team, two teams with a real client, and have to make something real. And what's interesting is that these people, whose ages range from 18 to 70, at least the iterations I've seen, are mostly homeless women and girls. The girls have been aged out of foster homes, so often go on the street. Many people are immigrants, many people are refugees from domestic abuse, and just think of all the horror stories that you are out there, and this is what's going on. They have a brilliant teacher, woman named Sharon Plunkett from Ireland, and in 15 weeks, these women learn to complete 2 projects, and in doing so, they learn all the 20/21st century skills, self-management, use of information, teamwork, presentation to external people, resume building. But it's all integrated with the work as opposed to taught, sometimes as we do in schools, external to a real activity. It's not disconnected. I think Joan, of course, said, well, how do you know it's working? Joan Herman. And the answer was 66% of the women, that's sort of a running total, get jobs, full-time jobs with benefits after 15 weeks. So with benefits, the university's trying to take those away. So this is quite astonishing. So while I tend to think personally in sort of big swaths of, can we make the system work? Can we do this? Can we do that? How can we scale? I'm once again reminded that it's very local, as Marcelo said, very specific, stepwise activity by committed people that will really not just be proof of concepts, but then can grow and move into something else. So I'm very struck by how well this group used all the things we know and research about, but applied them in a way that made a huge difference. These women who get jobs get apartments, which is like, can you imagine the personal change? So it was an opportunity, I think, to see some of the things I think about theoretically happen in real life with talented and committed people. And what they said I thought was really smart. They said they're very careful about selection. They don't want to choose people who will make it anyway. So they're not creaming off the best applicants. And that there are some people whose own personal issues are so overwhelming, I mean, that they can't. But an example that they gave me, I met a woman who lives in a car with a husband and a son, both who have debilitating diseases. Husband's in a wheelchair, the child needs therapy every day, and she still has made the commitment to go do this because that's the way she can change her life. And these women and girls have said, I never thought I could do anything. No one ever asked me to do anything independently. And so I internalize a little more what privilege means, because it was always an assumption that I could be independent and grow and do things. It's hard to imagine for me what it feels like never to have had that experience. So it's an example.
Yeah, no, it's a transformational example, and it's so uplifting to hear about all of the work that the three of you are involved in. And we'll go back to the title of our panel about accelerating academic excellence and equity, and we're talking about challenges and solutions. There are some solutions that are very transformational and are giving us hope. The frustrating part are the challenges, right? The highly resistant to change institutions, or the fact that we have funders, which is great. We love funders, but every funder has their priorities, and there's not a coherent strategy. I mean, public-private partnerships are a wonderful strategy for achieving what we want. But when a lot of times the well-meaning nonprofits are chasing what the funders want to do, and there's not, and so that I think is a frustrating thing about how do we kind of do an audit of what resources are available, and because it can feel like we're just doing piecemeal things, and the title of our panel might have been how do we save the world and change the world. It's a daunting thing, especially when it feels like it's very piecemeal and it's not coherent at a macro level. But that it also brings us back to Dr. King, I think, with this idea of having the ethical commitment and mustering the political will in our institutions, in our communities, and with elected officials to make those commitments, to find out what's working and scaling and experimenting and doing and investing the R&D. It was amazing that Eva and CRESST was able to do so much through DARPA, and how much they've invested. The Defense Department has invested in R&D for things for workforce and for the safety and security of our country.
And for 5-year-olds learning physics as well, right?
Right. Yes. And so we just need to invest more into education, R&D as well. And I think the things that these three panelists have talked about are great. We have about 15 minutes left. We wanted to make sure we had a conversation with you all. So we're going to open it up for some questions and answers with the audience.
Comments.
And comments, yeah.
What I'm interested in is, I know they have said that you have to start young, like K through 6, to really produce a successful individual. But I think we've forgotten about the kid that graduates from high school, not going to college, has maybe no ambition or idea where they want to go, but they lack the STEM skills. And those are exactly the kinds of students and kids we want in the Navy and other services. But we don't really have a mechanism for going back and saying, well, you didn't learn it in high school, so maybe we can give you something on your own. So my question to Mary is, do you deal with post K through 12?
That's a fantastic question. That's unfortunately, because the Boys and Girls Clubs only go up to 18, we haven't done a very good job of tracking what happens afterward. And I think that one of the things that we've done in the last few years, to your point about if they're lost, so to speak, or they don't have any ambition to go to college, we have been working with vocational and trade schools. and trying to get them in there. But when you say the Navy, it's true, it's very near and dear to my heart. My nephew is one of those people who was a very bright student and wants to join the Navy and is in the process of applying, FYI. And your question's a really good one. What do we do with them? I think that we do have a good percentage of our kids that come back and teach, and our staff at Boys and Girls Clubs, because it had such an impact on them. I think the outcomes, though, for after they're 18 and they leave and the tracking is very difficult. We do have a very strong percentage of foster kids, for instance, and they're very peripatetic, and tracking them is very difficult even in our clubs while they're there from ages 6 to 18. So,
you know, I had Eva do a study for me on looking at what's called the skill gap.
mm-hmm.
And that's the idea that, you know, employers have a set of skills they want from their future employees. Unfortunately, their future employees don't have those skills in their decision-making, problem-solving, teamwork skills, and other kinds of skills. And somewhere down the line, it's also STEM skills. So industry wants the same kinds of students and kids that we want in the service. So not only does the DoD have this issue to face, but industry does as well.
Absolutely, and I've spoken to many CEOs that sponsor Boys and Girls Clubs and asked them what some of the biggest challenges are, and they say that a lot of the new hires are lacking some of those collaborative skills, the soft skills, and I think that that's something that our clubs do focus on, and so does YMCA and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. I think that a lot of the after-school program organizations do focus on soft skills now. They're realizing that, you know, doing this all day on your phone, you're not as connected or engaged in the moment, and that's something that we are working on with our kids. And to your point, it's a great question. I hope I answered it sufficiently. I don't.
Question: a lot of fundraisers and funders rather are interested in helping to grow and incubate innovative programs, but then they're also really trying to look for the opportunity for scaling and systems connectivity and that kind of thing. So I don't know if you would have any comments related to the role of systems in helping to advance the work you're doing, and how your positive programs are, you know, part of or connected with other systems.
Great question.
Who wants to answer?
Okay. I confess that I've been mostly looking at systems within education and training institutions, although some after-school support. At CRESST, we've also worked with another local group, LA's Best, since its inception, an after-school program for elementary age kids. And so I think what's interesting to me about our evolution in thinking about systems is it is, as Greg Chung had put it, and others as well, a top-down, bottom-up process. That is, we think about what the goal state ought to be and what we know from research and learning, or what we think we know, and sometimes it changes. But the validation and modification is all very specific and bottom-up. And so, you try the idea out, and then and we learn, obviously, from our partners. To David, we work with PBS, as he's noted, for a number of years. We've learned an enormous amount about how to think systemically, including families, schools, various kinds of media, how to think about motivation and content and social emotional learning simultaneously. Well, we have that in mind, but it's very helpful to get real examples that, in fact, are scalable, because that leads us to the idea, I think, that we shouldn't give up on systems. And what I see often in this sort of high-tech world is everybody's crazy about the newest proof of concept thing. You know, there's one of them, and we like it, and it's a fad, and then it goes away. And so I'm very interested in what the interplay is between usable knowledge, and that's a Lynn, Bloom, and Cohen term for all the academics, usable knowledge that comes from feedback from smaller things, and then usable knowledge that comes from theory, R&D, and application, and how those things go together. I don't know enough about how to think about that, but I'm sure there are other people who have. And I think that that's something that we can work on together, because everybody comes from very different points of expertise.
One of the things that we've been doing, we launched it about 1.5 years ago, is the Los Angeles School Improvement Network. And in that work, we have brought together 11 schools. Some are private, some are charter, and some are parochial. Now, why did we bring them together? We found that many of these schools are in neighborhoods that are either the same neighborhood or adjacent to each other. They don't talk. The administrators don't talk, the teachers don't talk. So, they are serving the same populations of kids. And so what our hope is by bringing these groups together in a network, they can begin to talk to each other about successes and failures, what's working and what isn't working, at the teaching level, and as also at the learning level, at the management of the school itself level, just across the board. Along with that, getting people to put it on paper, if you will, to document the kinds of things that they've tried and failed, and to agree to try particular activities across the board and to report about what's successful or not. This particular School Improvement Network is focused on supporting teaching and learning and mathematics at the high school level. And what we're hoping to have come out of that is a set of approaches in teaching and learning that will tell us something about when does it work, for whom, why, how, and what might we do differently across the network and within the schools to see success for all kids.
Interesting. Well, we've been working with the county, LA County, on workforce development and trying to get our kids into meaningful employment part-time or during the summer so that they will start acquiring some skills. And then also we compound that with a life coach and financial literacy and kind of package it so that the individual will have a great fighting chance at success because they will have a multitude of resources that they wouldn't normally have. And the financial literacy is important if a child is not used to getting a paycheck and they don't understand taxes, and it's important for them to understand budgeting and things like that. So I think that we have partnered with a lot of our sponsors in bringing their employees to volunteer and engage with our kids, and it's been successful. It's been different. Some are from the aerospace industry, some are from technology. Even Nestle had a college and career readiness program that many of our kids would go into. It was like a feeding school to eventually work with them. And I think those are the kind of partnerships that are going to keep us and make us more successful in the future. It's going to have to be this hybrid, I think, of work and school. I was on a panel a couple weeks ago at another school, and one of the things that came up was, is it the responsibility for a university to prepare kids to be workforce development? Is it their responsibility, or is it really the curiosity and learning? And I'm more on the back end, where I think we just want them to have a passion for learning and education throughout their lifetime, because that's really what's going to serve them well, and to always spark that curiosity. I think that's something that we've somehow drowned out in kids, and I see it in all of our clubs, where it's exciting to see them curious and want to learn more, and why does it work that way? That's where STEM, I think, does come in. But I also think that it's important for us to remember that it's education, 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 which was said earlier. So I think that's exciting when we can get them into early employment and meaningful jobs where they will pay for school while they're working, because that's going to me, I've seen it, and it's the best outcome. The individual will enjoy working, they have a structure, and then they also are going to school, and usually that's paid for by the company. So I think this is the direction we're going. These are the trends I'm seeing. I think it's very exciting.
That's great. I'll just add on to everyone's great answers to Pam's question with a shameless plug, and talk for a very quick second about why I love working in public media, because when you talk about systems change, I think public media, and particularly the CPB-PBS Ready to Learn grant initiative, is we have the unique opportunity to be at the nexus of multi-stakeholder partnerships that are at a national level with private sector companies like the Jim Henson Company and Fred Rogers Productions and all these amazing private sector companies, working together with them, with the research community. Betsy McCarthy's here, who's the researcher from West Ed, who's helping Twin Cities Public Television with their Ready to Learn grant. We have Phil Vahey here from SRI, who's part of the research consortium of the CPB-PBS Ready to Learn grant. And it's not only national partnerships that we are at the nexus of, but it's the local with our PBS member stations all around the country, and they're amazing partners that are doing some of this, groundbreaking work with under-resourced communities. So I think there's systems change that public media is uniquely positioned to be a catalyst for. So I think we have time for one more question or comment. Yes, sir.
I believe Professor Gomez mentioned signaling. Well, the description of signaling, that is the communication that's given to students in order to let them know how to be academically proficient. So how can that be more equitably distributed to all students, so that not only a particular set of students get that by going to a particular school, but how can that be more equitable across diverse schools?
I'm so glad you asked that. It's true that much of the work that I've been doing and colleagues who have done that sort of work have focused at the community college level, high school level, and some middle school grades. But I think that in programs like the Boys and Girls Club and other sorts of places where there can be opportunities for leadership, where students are learning how to do the kind of thing that the gentleman back there who said, well, his writing wasn't all that good, but it's okay because I learned how to defend my ideas and to express my ideas through discourse. I think it's those kinds of opportunities to help to give kids a way to be explicit about what they believe, what they think, and why they think it, and to combine the written discourse, the verbal communication, and other tools for expressing their understanding.
Sorry.
To combine those opportunities in regularly presented experiences in these after-school and out-of-school settings. What I believe that the workplace wants is to see people who can make a claim and provide actual evidence for it and just aren't sort of on the fly, who can communicate ideally verbally as well as through written discourse and perhaps through other kinds of media, but in short, being able to feel confident in communicating what they want and what they know, and to communicate that with others in collaboration and small group work and teamwork and so forth. I think that's what the workplace wants. It's certainly what will help students stand apart and help young people stand apart from colleagues who are not getting those experiences. So I would say that the combination of what's happening in school, but for the precious few, and what could happen in out of school and after school and summer programs that offer these leadership and communication opportunities is what we need to really be pushing going forward.
Well, I really want to join me in thanking our amazing panel, Kim Gomez, Mary Hewitt, Eva Baker, for this great session.